change is your goal, let me change your mind. Why do you think it is that we find ourselves in a position of what the world would call failure in any given area of our life? Particularly things that are based on our character, maybe deeply rooted and often very difficult, if almost impossible, to change. So what do you do in a situation like that? Do you hate yourself, or do you attempt to change? You know, like hating yourself for that specific part of you. I mean, not hating yourself as a whole. I'm talking if there's a particular area. So if you go out to change that particular area and you don't manage to do it, well then we've been taught that that is in fact failure. But I would argue that the failure only exists in the fact that we are taking the wrong approach. It's only failure because that's what we're told it is. Instead of us understanding it's a redirection towards a method that can work for us to do what we call change, which is really, as I say, almost impossible. So in my experience, I've always found the best thing to do is not attempt to change anything. Is to look at your character and understand it and take a part of it that you so-called want to change and reshape it. Change how you look at it. And I wouldn't say I'm talking about an exercise in acceptance as just accept where you are and don't bother trying to change. I don't think that's what I'm actually referring to here. My ideas grow in the moment of speaking, so bear with me. I think it's more about understanding that some things are deep-rooted, and if we look at them in a different way, they may not need to be changed, but redirected, reshaped and redirected to a different area of our life where that particular trait is not viewed as a negative aspect, whether it be physical, emotional, or whatever. And we're not talking about if somebody has some unhealthy ideas or habits that go and find people that have the same. No, I'm referring always to bettering yourself, not making things more difficult for you. So if change is not our goal and reshaping is, then how do we do that? How do we take something that we perceive to be negative and turn it on its head? Because I think it would be just as unhelpful to try and make what we perceive to be negative positive by trying to fool ourselves, because we achieve nothing in that. I think, like, I remember doing a talk once in a AIDS unit where people went for support. It was in London when I was down there, and I remember doing a talk, and somebody in that room had been to use common terms, a crackhead, but just an addict, you know, your common old garden addict, you know, like a lot of people are. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I think it's to put out there like it can't happen to you, and it can't. There's very little distance between us and the people we so-called perceive as failures. But anyway, I was talking to this young man, and he was explaining how his addiction had got him where he was and his need for money. And he was saying, how could he ever change his life because he's got no skills and this is all he's ever done? And I mean, I know I could say very cliche things like we all have skills. Do you know what I mean? But that's nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's not helpful when somebody's trying to identify a way out of their situation. So I remember asking him to explain to me what he did on a daily basis to maintain his habit. And he proceeded to talk to me about how he got up at the crack of dawn, excuse the pun, and he got up around 4:30 in the morning, and he went out and he did some sex work. He also went from that and he had to make a certain amount of money a day to keep up his habit. I think it was crack and heroin mix that he was on at the time, and he had to get a certain amount of money a day just to be okay, so to speak. So that involved many, many different things, not just the sex work. And I remember saying to him, explain to me what you do on a daily basis to maintain your habit. And I listened to his story, and he explained that he would do different types of work. I don't want to be specific because I don't really even think it's fair. He did specific types of work throughout the day so he could guarantee a certain amount of money to just be normal, as you would say. Not even normal, that doesn't exist, but normal in respect of having had enough to function, enough drugs to function. And he proceeded to tell me, break it down, what time he got up, what he did, how he managed to get from A to B. And it was really a combination of the most fascinating skills. One, like commitment and dedication, goes without saying, does it, as well as ability to achieve your outcome. But I started to turn everything he had told me around. Like, for instance, his dedication to get up in the morning at a particular time, that's a serious commitment to work and ability to do so. So if that was put into something else, it's almost like he would never miss a day, that kind of commitment. And then going from having no money in a day when you wake up, and then going out and being able to almost guarantee you will find a way to get the money you needed for that day. Honestly, I don't know where I'd begin if I had to break my life into 24 hours at a time. And then, like, he proceeded to tell me about how much money he'd get all day, and how he would do certain things that would increase the amount of money. He would almost invest by buying other things and then passing them on, and how he would increase his money. And he was very, very good at it. And I said to him, so imagine if you put that same skill of turning over money to a different project, like one that's not going to get you arrested or in any further danger. Like, I even had to explain it in the biggest terms before I shrunk it. Things like the stock market. You know, if you're able to invest in such a way and know a product that is going to sell on a daily basis, a helpful product or an idea or wherever, intellectual property, whatever, on a daily basis, if you have that kind of intuition, your life could be very, very different. Anyway, we got to the point where I'd broken down and turned around a lot of the stuff that he did, making his qualities just quite outstanding, you know, and all because he served an addiction. So I think it would have been very silly for me to try at that point say to him that, well, you can stop your addiction. Sorry, you can change it by stopping your addiction. And I don't believe you can. I believe addiction is part of someone's makeup unless you go deep in and start using alternative therapies to get to the actual root of where that programming lies. But for that moment, that wasn't possible because I don't think he could see long term, you know, so I didn't want to give him a way that wasn't manifestable in the short term. So you can't convince someone in a day that they can actually utilize addiction in a different way, but you can convince them to take the elements of that addiction, because it's things they recognize and things they know they can do, and gradually take each stage of it and redirect it to a different outlet. And that way it's still addiction, but it's addiction that helps your life. So this is what I mean by change not being helpful, because often when we attempt change and we don't get there, the world perceives it as failure instead of redirection. And the redirection should always be towards the self and looking at what it is we want to change and how we can change how we view it and then utilize it in a different area.